Welcome to The Currency of Grief, the podcast where we confront two of society's most taboo topics, death and money. My name is Justin Weidenfeld, and I'm here to serve as your grief financial officer, guiding you through the complex and emotional journey of what happens when money and mortality collide. Whether you're navigating the aftermath of losing a loved one, looking for practical advice on handling pre- and post-death planning, or simply just wanting to start those hard conversations about legacy while you still can, this space is for you. Together, we'll hear real-life stories from real-life people who have navigated the intersection of grief and money and come out the other side. Our guests will share their stories, practical insights, valuable advice, and moments of clarity so that none of you have to navigate this alone. I'm grateful you've decided to join us on this journey. Now let's dive in. So without further ado, let's meet our guests for today's podcast. I am humbled and honored to be in the virtual studio with Becky Robison. Becky is the author of My Parents Are Dead, What Now? A panic-free guide to the practicalities of death, and therefore she's become sort of an accidental death expert. This all started when Becky lost both of her parents, and as the oldest child, she took on the brunt of the post-death logistics and responsibilities. She felt betrayed that she had been left with a huge responsibility, and there were seemingly no instructions, no playbook, and unfortunately, no one truly, fully reliable to turn to. There were people on her path who were able to help her, but, no one had all the answers. And even though it may be incredibly challenging and overwhelming in the moment, Becky graduated college with an English degree and a background in creative writing. She'll be the first to say, if she can figure it out, you can too. Becky, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Justin. That was a great intro. And don't worry, I also always flub the title of my own book because it is long. Yeah, but I'm so happy to be here.
Of course. So I read your book and reached out to you, and that's why we're here. But when I told you a little bit about what the currency of grief was, what made you want to come on the podcast and share your story?
I am always so excited to meet other people. Well, maybe excited is the wrong word, but I'm always happy to meet other people who understand that monetary and legal and financial concerns are so difficult on top of grief, and I think that's something that's just less talked about when it comes to grief. People talk about the emotional side, but they don't talk about how all the legal and financial ramifications of a death can add to that grief and make it more difficult. So I was thrilled when you wanted me to come on and talk, because I'm always looking for a way to spread that message. I want what I didn't have. I want someone to tell me it's going to be okay. And I want someone to tell me what to do and what their experiences was like, so I can learn from them. So giving me the opportunity to do that, I was happy to jump on and talk more about what I went through in the book.
100%. And hopefully, the goal for this podcast is to kind of be the playbook, to provide the answers, to at least ensure that if somebody's listening who's going through this muck of a loss on top of, or financial and logistics, the challenges around that on top of a loss, at least you're not alone, and there are people who have gone through it as well, and maybe we can shed some light, provide some answers and resources, and point in the right direction. And on that same vein, this podcast is the first of a 2-part series with Becky. I recruited her to do 2 episodes with me and spend, 2 hours with me. And the first part of this series, Becky's going to talk about her experience and, what it was like to lose both of her parents and navigate those financial and logistical, situations. And then everything that she's learned as a death doula, as a volunteer for hospice patients, interviewing hundreds of people for her book. So let's start there. Becky, as you know, here on The Currency of Grief, we don't hold back. We dive right in. So tell us a little bit about your grief story.
Yeah. So my mom, Nancy Robison, died in 2020. She was a therapist. So she spent her whole life helping other people figure stuff out. And something that I find really sad about her life is that she struggled so much at the end of her life. After her sister died, after like a combination of events, she began drinking more and suffered from alcoholism. So fortunately, that was not something I had to deal with as a child, and I feel grateful for that. I know people who were raised by alcoholic parents, and it's a big struggle, but it was still very difficult to watch my mom go through that. And so she was in a long decline for several years. She would go to rehab, she'd try to get better, she wouldn't get better, and eventually it just kind of petered down to this very, very slow decline. And she did die in 2020. Fortunately, she was able to die at home. I was very worried that she was going to end up in the hospital, and because of COVID, we wouldn't be able to be with her while she was dying. But she was able to die at home. We had hospice was able to come in and bring a bed, and there was a hospice nurse who would come in and check on us. And so she was with me and my sister and my dad when she died. So that was good, at least. It was the least horrible death of many that I had imagined for her, fortunately, after that experience. So that was a really different experience from how my dad died, because this was sort of a slow process, right? And for years, I had been anticipating her death and mentally preparing for her death. With my dad, it was an entirely different story. I moved to Louisville in early 2022, kind of starting a whole new life. I was just coming down to this new city. I bought a house that was wacky. I was like, look at me, I'm my life. And then just a few months after I moved here, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So my sister and I knew his prognosis. I mean, he knew it was bad, but he was a very stubborn, grumpy, conservative man. And he was pretty sure he was going to beat cancer, like stage 4 cancer, out of spite. So he did not want to know his prognosis exactly. But my sister and I knew that it was probably going to be a year. So at most. So I was driving up there every 2 weeks to help my sister take care of my dad. So driving from Kentucky to Wisconsin every 2 weeks, which I was happy to do because I, wanted to see my dad and wanted to help take care of him. And also I was really lucky that I had a job. After COVID, my job just stayed remote. So I was able to do all of that remotely, and it was easy for me to do my job while I was helping take care of him. But it was a whole process. Chemo worked really well at first, then it didn't. And he died about 9 months after his diagnosis in March 2023. So it was a really rough couple of years. Do not recommend losing both your parents in the span of just a few years. And I was so mad about his death too, because he worked so hard to take care of my mom for such a long time. And I was like, oh, finally, he gets to relax. He gets to retire. He gets to golf. He gets to fish. And that's not what happened. Instead, he died. So that makes me pretty mad. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the background, and I'm sorry that you get to live with that feeling of your dad didn't get to. One of our other guests said, your dad didn't get to live the back nine. He was it seems like both of your parents love taking care of other people, and your dad was taking care of your mom, and then all of a sudden, he gets this diagnosis and dies nine months later. So that's really hard.
Yeah, that's an apt metaphor for him, especially because he loved golf. He didn't get to play the back nine. It's very frustrating to see that he didn't get to live that part of his life. They had both been working so hard. They were both small business owners, both entrepreneurs. My mom co-owned her own therapy business. My dad was an architect. He had started his own architectural firm, and so they'd worked and worked and worked and worked. And it was like, finally they get to, oh, never mind. They don't get to do that at all, which, is perhaps a lesson that working is important, but maybe you should do the things you want to do now before death catches up with you.
Yeah, I love that. That's so important, because the point of this is to be able to confront our own mortality. And if we're just sitting behind a desk, behind a screen, or, working for our entire lives, and we don't get to experience what's outside of the screen, the desk, the world, it's you're missing out on a lot, unfortunately. But I'm sure they lived a very full life.
Yeah, they did. And at least they were working at things that they had built from scratch on their own, and they were doing what they really wanted to do. But I'm sure it really does change your perspective. Like once you watch your parents who they're the people who raised you, and even as you become an adult, you realize adults don't have it figured out, but they're this kind of like rock solid foundation, and then they aren't, and it's just it's really really shakes things up and makes you want to change what you're doing. It makes you reevaluate at least how you're going about your own life.
100%. And so, how old were you when, your parents died? And then, I don't know if you said your dad's name, but I'd love to.
Oh, yes. I hope I did. My dad was Daniel Robison. He, like I said, was a grumpy conservative man. It was really weird. He loved to like hunt and fish and stuff like that. But also he loved musicals, you know what I mean? So he was just, he contained multitudes, and he really loved us. And, even though I am hardly conservative, I'm like whatever the opposite of that is, as far as you can go. I was still able to, I still had a relatively good relationship with him up until he died. We were able to kind of like see past our differences in that regard. And I think part of that too is, my dad caring for my mom, I think, was one of the most selfless acts of love I've ever witnessed. She was not an easy person to take care of. Alcoholism makes people not be their best selves a lot of the time. And he withstood that with a lot of grace. And I think a lot of people would have left, but he didn't. And I just think that was a really incredible thing to witness, honestly.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. And that's, amazing to share, and a tribute to who he is and who you've become, which is special.
Yeah.
So after your mom passed away, what were the immediate action steps? What role did you take on? And then same question for after your dad passed away as well.
Yeah, you asked my ages too. So my dad died when I was 35. So that means I think I was 33 when my mom died, 32, 33. So after my mom died, my dad was still alive. So he was handling a lot of the stuff with like lawyers and wills. And of course, because they were spouses, like all of that was hers, would just simply go to him. But I did, my sister and I were certainly old enough to help with the death rituals and everything. We helped plan her memorial. We helped pick out her urn. We all sat together. We didn't know it at the time that you could buy an urn elsewhere. So we bought one from the funeral home that was, probably more expensive than it had to be, but it's a beautiful urn, I have to say. My mom would have loved the colors. And I also wrote her obituary because as you said, I have a writing background. So I wrote her obituary. I checked with her living sister, Trish, my Aunt Trish, to make sure everything I was saying was good. So that was my first experience in obituary writing. And then, like I said, my sister and I very much helped plan the memorial with my dad. Like he called the venue, but we made sure like we were figuring out invitations. We were figuring out, because my mom died during COVID, we couldn't have a memorial right away. It was 2020. We had like a few people over on our deck, but we didn't have like an actual memorial until a year later. And it was actually, that was kind of weird. You don't get a lot of closure when you have to wait that long, or it's just harder, I guess, in that way to wait a little bit. But although there are benefits to it too, you kind of get out from under the immediate grief before you have to deal with a bunch of people. Like,
100, yeah. It's just unorthodox, but what's normal in the death world?
Yeah, no, nothing really. And we held it at her favorite pizza joint. Like there's this bar restaurant that my family has been going to for years called Kaiser's in Gurnee. And so they had like outside tents at the time. So we set up out there and ordered her favorite pizza. It was really nice, actually. But anyway, after my dad died, then I was without grown-ups to handle the legal and financial stuff. And I, just a 35-year-old baby, was suddenly tasked with that work. And I knew that it would probably fall to me like I don't think my dad had explicitly said, oh, you're going to be like the executor, but I'm the eldest daughter. I had kind of guessed that is where it would end up going, right? So, and that was right. I went and searched for his will. I found his will, and he actually had a living trust as well. They were in a box under the Christmas decorations. And then I was like, oh no, what do I do with this? I think that was the big problem, is because I hadn't helped my dad with that stuff after my mom died. And the person who I would have asked, of course, was my dad or my mom, and they were dead. So I couldn't ask them what to do with all of this paperwork. So I did a couple of things. I asked my aunts and uncles and my friends' parents, and they were very helpful in other ways. Like, they were trying to help me, but they either couldn't remember the nitty gritty details of how to do it because it had been so long ago when their parents died, and, you know, they could remember the grief, but they couldn't remember like the details of what you should do with this form, basically. And then one of my friend's fathers was very helpful. He worked for a long time in insurance, so he was able to at least kind of like translate some of the words that were on the documents, you know, and all of that stuff. So they were trying to help me in that way, but no one could give me an exact like roadmap of like, here's step one, this is what you do. And I went to talk to my dad's lawyer as well. And that was not as helpful as you would think it would be, because I think I didn't know what to ask. And he only spoke lawyer jargon. And so I just felt like we were talking past each other. I remember asking like, okay, there's a trust. Can you explain to me what that means? Like, is the trust an object? Is it just this paperwork? How do I know what's in the trust? You know, and he just really like seemed flabbergasted that I didn't already know. And I was like, well, how would I know? How would I know? I didn't do this. Like, I didn't have deep discussions with you when we were making this. And yeah, it was a bit of a struggle. So that's how I ended up, you know, building all of this anyways. I was so frustrated that I couldn't find this information. I could find bits and bobs here online, but there was not one single place where I could find it. So I ended up creating a website called deadparentswhatnow.com because I have a dark sense of humor. And it was supposed to be a living document. Like, I'll just put what I find when I figure it out. I'll put it up here so other people who are in my position also have that information. And then it kind of took off, and I was like, uh-oh, now I have an extra job. It's running this website.
Yeah. All right. So backtracking a little bit. So what was it like to use your creative writing background to write your parents' obituaries? And like, what type of advice do you give to people who are asking you, you know, how do I do this? Like, how do I sum up someone's entire life in this, you know, one website page or one, you know,
right.
one page?
Yeah, well, in a way, so for me, writing my parents' obituaries was really meaningful because it was something I concretely knew I had the skill to do, right? It was something where I was like, I don't know anything about how wills work, but you know what I do know? How to put pen to paper. So I could, you know, write their story. That was very meaningful to me, and it was very cathartic. Like, it was a part of the mourning process, but I can understand how people who don't like to write are, you know, perhaps quite intimidated because you do have to sum up a whole life story in just a few paragraphs. A couple things I would say is you don't have to do it alone. Like, even if you're the one primarily tasked with writing, it's worth it to ask other people, not only for other people who knew your parent or whoever has died, you know, other people who love them, you know, not only for like feedback in terms of your writing, but also for stories or things that you might have missed, like things that you just didn't know about them. You're not the only one responsible for coming up with their whole life story. There are other people who are going to want to help you. Yeah. And then the other thing is there are standard ways to do an obituary. Like, there's usually a specific cadence to them and that sort of thing. But also, you don't have to do that. Like, no one's going to like arrest you if you tell a funny joke in the obituary, or if you write it in first person from their perspective, or if you write it, you know, there's really nothing. There's nothing anyone can do to stop you. So I would say, don't think of it. I know that you want to honor your parents and you want to make something that feels like respectful of them and that honors their legacy, but also don't feel like this is a school project and like someone's grading you. I would say just write from your heart. Yeah. And the only other thing I would say is, in terms of logistical stuff, just be a little careful about what details you put in obituaries sometimes, because there are scammers who like to take sort of the answers to internet security questions from people's obituaries and steal identities. So things like the street where they grew up, or like the name of their first pet, all those internet security questions you have when you set up an account, just be a little careful about putting those in an obituary. Luckily, that did not happen to me, but I've heard from people other people that stuff like that has happened to.
That's super smart, and definitely something that I would have never thought of is, we loved our first home on, XYZ street, and then all of a sudden a scammer comes in and
yeah, the other thing is weird AI obituaries. That's the other thing where like you put like a social media post up and then AI rips it and like creates a fake obituary for your person and puts it on like a site so that it can get clicks and like ad revenue. This is a thing that actually happens. It's disturbing.
Wow.
We live in a dark and scary world.
Yeah, for real. And then I wanted to ask this question: how was money talked about growing up? You mentioned your dad being very conservative, and I believe so. You had moved to Louisville, Louisville. You were in. I think your parents were in Wisconsin. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we grew up in Northern Illinois, but a lot of people do this when they retire in Northern Illinois. They get like a condo or a little place over the Wisconsin border because the property taxes are a little cheaper. So we grew up in Northern Illinois, but by the time that they died, they were snowbirding. So, or by the time my dad died, at least, they had a small condo in Wisconsin and a small condo in Florida.
Makes sense. Okay. So given, Midwest roots, how was money talked about in your home growing up?
Not concretely. And I think this happens in a lot of people's houses. I think it was very taught to us from a young age that it was important to save money. Like if our grandparents gave us money for our birthday or something, my parents would be like, you can put it in the bank account and then it's like saved and you don't spend it all, and it was emphasized very much that we should work hard, that sort of thing. But specific talk of money was not really a thing. I think we talk about a lot how death is a taboo in this country, but I think money is also a taboo in this country. It's somehow tacky to talk about your assets with your kids. Whereas no, it would have been extremely helpful to me if I had known specifically what assets they had and how much they were worth. That would have made things a lot easier, but no, we didn't talk about money. We never had a sit down and was like, this is how much I make and this is about how much you'll have. I almost think my dad tried to initiate that conversation one time, but he was really bad at it. And I also didn't really know what was going on and why he was saying it. And I was like, okay, because it wasn't sit down, we got to talk about this so that when I go, this stuff, it was just kind of all right, great, I guess,
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were to give an advice to a listener who may be wanting, is in your dad's shoes and maybe wanting to approach this conversation with their kids, how would you have wanted to have been approached?
I just wish, it was very straightforward. Hey, we have to talk about this. I think almost if they had taken it as a necessary responsibility of parenting. This is part of parenting. And just because you are a legal adult now, I feel this way all the time, but I'm like, man, I wish I still had a mom and a dad. There is a lot of parenting I still need in my life, I feel. And this is one thing where I really wish it had been sort of this task of parenting. Okay, we're getting older. We need to sit down. We need to have a discussion about this. It might be uncomfortable, but, you need to know this stuff so that when the day comes, you'll be able to figure out what's going on. Or there's so much you could roll into that conversation too. Here's what I want for a funeral. Here's what I want. I know no one likes thinking about their own mortality, but that would have been so helpful. So my sister and I didn't have to guess, just all of that.
And here's why as well. I want to be cremated so that, you could spread my, because I love to travel and I want to be spread on the golf course and here and there, and everywhere that's illegal and stuff like that.
Right. I all of that would have been very nice to know, because then you can bond with them more too. You can say oh, this is what my parents think of their legacy, right? This is this is the legacy they want to leave behind and why. And you might even get into memories and talk about that stuff. That's so cool and important if you think of it as a kind of family project in that way. But yeah, there were never any formal conversations about that. I think that parents don't want to worry their kid. I'm sure my parents were well, first of all, my dad, I'm sure, was convinced that he would never die. He would live forever. But also, I think that they just didn't want to worry their kids. They did want to get their stuff together because I remember them dealing with their parents' deaths and my great aunt's deaths. And we're explicitly being like, we don't want to, this was like a lot of work. We don't want you to have to do a lot of work. But never like having a discussion about what preparations they were making in order to make that happen. And they did prepare a lot, but all their preparations didn't necessarily mean I was any better prepared to deal with them.
Right. And they obviously prepared a lot because they had the pour over will and they had a living trust, which you became the executor of their will, of your dad's will, and then the successor trustee of the pour over trust. So obviously they had prepared and they had thought about it. How did you feel when this huge responsibility was sort of left upon you and there were no instructions?
I mean, I felt a couple things. I felt like I had to do a good job for my parents. Like I felt like this weight, I have a very active form of grief, but it was sort of like, this is one thing I can do to get it. This situation is a mess, but this is the one thing I can do. But I also felt kind of betrayed that no such instructions existed. I was like, are you kidding? This is something that so many people have to do every year. And like, there's no one, like a lawyer's not going to tell me what to do. There's no checklist. Like I probably have to take this will somewhere to a court. There's not someone going to sit me down and tell me exactly what I have to do. Why isn't anyone telling me what I have to do? This is crazy. There's nothing else in life. It's not like you get a job and they're like, all right, figure it out. You know what I mean? Like you usually go through training or other things, and, or at least there's a job description. And there was none of that for this. I was like, okay, I gotta do something, I guess. And I felt like very betrayed by the world, that there was simply no help, no instructions for that. It was really frustrating. I'm laughing about it now, but at the time I was pretty upset that, I was scared too. Like, what if I do something wrong? Am I going to get arrested? Like, it's legal stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. Am I going to have to owe money out of my own pocket?
Right. I don't know. Like at that time, like you don't, spoiler, but you don't inherit your parents' debts. But I didn't know that at the time. And I mean, there might still be incidental things you have to pay for, but yeah, it's just, it was so scary. And it just felt like profoundly overwhelming. And I just couldn't believe that there were no, like, it seemed like a will should have instructions. Like something should have instructions. There should be a document like, here you go, here's what you do. And I thought it was a little crazy that I was under like a legal task, but no one was telling me. It would be like if someone gave you a parking ticket, but like did not tell you how to pay the parking ticket. They were like, here's what you owe. And you're like, great, how do I pay? No one's going to tell you that. Like nowhere to take it. There's no link to pay. There's no, it was just like, great. So I'm going to get in huge trouble maybe if I don't do this, but I don't know how to do it.
Right. Or like, yeah, I would say a parking ticket, but also like 10 to 100 times more traumatic. Like an accident on top of a parking ticket,
Yeah.
And then you have to you get a new car, but there's no instructions of like how to get a new car and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
Beating this metaphor to death.
Obviously like on a much larger scale, but
100%.
Yeah, it did feel, I was just really, I couldn't believe it. I was so shocked.
Yeah. So what did helpful or good advice look like and where did it come from? And then was there any, since, I know you love humor, was there any really bad advice you received throughout this?
Well, I don't know if it's bad advice exactly, but one thing that happened was that if you are a successor trustee, you are supposed to sign an acceptance of trust. Like it is like, oh, you're stepping up into the role of trustee. This is a document you're supposed to sign. And I didn't know that because my dad's lawyer didn't tell me that. He didn't have me sign an acceptance of trust. So I was just acting as the trustee for months before I figured out that this was a thing I was supposed to do. Before a different lawyer was like, what do you mean you didn't sign that? And luckily it was just me and my sister, the only beneficiaries of the trust. So, and we get along. So she wasn't going to like sue me or anything for having done this, but it could have gone real bad if the circumstances had been different. And so that was kind of hilarious in retrospect that I went do what you're like technically supposed to do is like talk to a lawyer, and then he denial me at all in that regard. I mean, I think some of the best help was maybe not logistical help, but just like keeping my head above water a lot of the times. I had really amazing friends. Like my best friends came from out of town. Like one came up from Chicago to Wisconsin, but one came from Denver. And they came and stayed with us while my dad was dying. And then after he died, and they helped cook and they helped clean and they made us like little care packages to bring to the hospital. And they brought Twister so we could play Twister, like, which was genuinely helpful. Like when you're so overcome with just grief, it's kind of amazing to be like, I'm just going to put my right hand on red. You know, that's something I can do. Put my right hand on red.
Right. I can roll the dice or any specific.
Yeah, or like spin those. Yeah. So we played games. They were so great. I mean, that was incredible. And then also in terms of more logistical help, like I said, my friend's dad helping me interpret documents, that was really good. My Uncle Bill in Florida referred me to an estate attorney there, his estate attorney, and that was very helpful. She was a much better attorney than my dad's attorney. So it's not like there weren't people trying to help me. There were people trying to help me, but it was just not exactly the help I expected. But yeah, I would say a lot of the best help I received ended up being non-logistical help. It was help from my friends. Just like I often describe my support network as aggressive. Like it was like, okay, we're just gonna like help you out. We're gonna make sure you got what you need. And I'm like eternally grateful for that.
100%. When you lose someone, when you lose a parent, and especially both parents, you really have to step up into adulthood very quickly. And I volunteer with kids who have lost a parent or sibling, and they are some of the most mature people that I've ever met, and they're age 8 to 18. And so these kids, have to step up and start cooking, start cleaning, start helping around the house at such a young age. And at any age, you have to step up and handle more logistics and handle more adulting. And so the fact that you can have friends, and yes, the cooking and cleaning and them helping you is super important. And the fact that you can just have friends come back and play Twister and be a kid again, I feel like it just has such a profound impact on your experience. Like, yes, the entire world is collapsing around me, but I'm just smiling and having fun and playing this game, and we can move forward.
Yeah, it's like there is life outside of your grief.
Yes.
Your grief is not all consuming. There is still Twister. There is still like your friends are going to watch TV with you. There's just like there are still appetizers at the local restaurant. It's like we're gonna. Yeah, it was just really helpful to remember that there was life outside of this, and I wasn't going. Even if it's like because I was the executor, they couldn't necessarily legally help me with things. It was like they've got the emotional side. I've always got someone I can vent to at the very least.
Yes, and for example, you can have a companion just be on the phone with you as you're calling the bank, as you're calling the courts. Like I know you talk about this in your book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so like if you have a friend who's lost someone, you want to support them. Literally, just like sitting by them can sometimes be helpful because making all those phone calls is stressful and sometimes boring, and it's so like a literal parallel play situation. Like it can be helpful literally if you're just sitting with them with like a hand on their back or just in the room with them, honestly, to make sure they're okay when they get off of that call. Or if you hear them struggling, like, oh, let me get the paper, you can get the paper, you know what I mean? Like you can get the paper and pen. Anything like that is that kind of support may seem simple, but it can be very helpful in the moment.
Definitely. I love that advice. There was a moment in your grief journey before your dad died that you mentioned had like shifted, and you talked about your dad's denial about him eventually, his mortality. And so talk about that moment that really shifted everything for you when you guys were in the hospital.
Yeah. So like I said, my dad was very stubborn. He did not think he was going to die. And at a certain point in his chemo wasn't going very well. He was getting a lot of blood transfusions for anemia, which was caused by the chemo. And it was just, you could tell he was declining quickly, or at least I could tell. And my sister could tell. And he knew he felt bad, but I'm not sure he realized that. I know he didn't realize that this was the time. So we brought him to the hospital for a blood transfusion. He was in the hospital bed, and this part is fuzzy because I don't remember how it ended up on my shoulders. It's quite possible I took it on my shoulders as the eldest daughter. But I ended up being the one who had to tell him that he wasn't leaving the hospital, that this was it. He was going to die here. And I remember sort of like crouching down in front of him. He was like in a recliner, and the look of horror on his face, I will never forget. He genuinely didn't know. Like no matter how bad he felt, he could barely walk. You know what I mean? No matter all of his symptoms, how bad he was feeling, the fact that he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, a particular cancer from which very few people, especially at stage 4, ever survive. He did not think he was going to die. And to watch that realization cross his face, with horror, like that's the only thing I can describe it, is he was horrified. This was the moment where he finally had to accept that he was a mortal human being and that his life was going to end. He was going to be no more. And it was awful. Like it was just a horrible thing to look at on his face. And he was upset, he was genuinely upset. And it was just a really hard thing to have to do. I do not envy doctors who have to do this all the time, tell people that they're going to die. But it made me realize that I don't ever want to be that in denial about anything, really. But it's like, I want to learn as much as I can. I want to be as clear-eyed about my life as possible. And also it made me kind of less afraid to do things, because I don't ever want to get to a point in my life where I'm like the prospect of my death. Nobody likes to think about their own death, sure, but I don't want to be horrified. I want to say, well, I did what I could. You know what I mean? Like I did what I could. So, I mean, the fact that I ended up quitting my job to work on this book and, work on this website, all of that stuff, I don't think I would have done it if I hadn't had that moment with my dad, because it's better. Like nothing can be as scary as that, right? Nothing can be as terrifying as that. So it paradoxically kind of gave me the courage to kind of leap off the cliffs of life and just try things, because I don't ever want to have that moment. I don't know if it was a moment of regret exactly, but a moment of horror. Like, I don't want that prospect to be so horrifying, to be so unprepared for that.
Yeah, of the realization of life is over, and maybe I didn't get to play all 9 holes on the back 9, or do X, Y, and Z that I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
really and the fact that you have to leave the people that you love too. Right. Yeah, that you really thought that you were this like exception, when really we're all just doing our best out here. We're all yeah, and I think just to be clear-eyed about these things. I don't ever want to be so in denial about really anything, but about death too. Oh, yeah, definitely. So thank you for sharing that. I did want to talk about that and those emotions of being the one to tell your dad that he wasn't going to be leaving the hospital. It's really hard. Yeah. Oh, it was awful. I've been over that with therapists a lot. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess transitioning from his death to what happens next. And so obviously you took on, you planned the funeral, wrote the obituary, and took on the role of executor and successor trustee. So what did all of that mean? What does all of that mean, and what did that mean in your specific situation? Well, I will say one thing you can sort of delegate as the executor is funeral planning. Like, you're not legally required to do that necessarily. So my sister helped a lot with that. I think, she certainly, I had like veto power. She was like, no, if she presented something, but she did a lot of that work. But for me, what it looked like in the first couple of days is, I think, like doing the things that I already knew how to do because of mom, honestly. So we knew from my mom's case that we would need a lot of death certificates. So I made sure when I was filling out the paperwork and working with the
funeral home to have him cremated that we got the package with the most death certificates, so that was really awkward. But in the most, I was looking at his will, trying to understand it. I was bringing the paperwork to my friend's dad, to like showing it to people to see if they could understand what it meant or what I was supposed to do. And I made an appointment with his lawyer pretty early on. I called because I didn't know also then that you don't need to use the same lawyer as who drafted the will. So I thought it was my assumption that would be the next step, right? Is that you would go to this lawyer who had drawn up this will and they would tell you how to execute said will. So that was something I did like within probably a few days of my dad's death. And now, again, in retrospect, after interviewing people, I know that that's not always, certainly you don't have to use the same lawyer, but that's not always what has to happen. You can't really do much without the death certificates anyway. So you got to wait. But in the first few days after his death, it was a lot of doing things I already knew how to do. So like writing the obituary, getting that published, helping my sister plan. We also put off his memorial for a few months, not as long as my mom's, but just to kind of dig ourselves out from under the logistical, everything else we had to do basically, and try to like figure stuff out. Telling people, because he had still been working part-time for a business that he worked for. So telling them, that was a big part of it. Filing for a life insurance claim. I didn't know, I'd never filed for a life insurance claim before, but what I didn't know when I did that was that the life insurance agent was a childhood friend of my father's. So when I called him, he started crying. So then I am like comforting this man on the phone that I don't know when I have just lost my own father. It was a little bit wacky. Yeah.
What was that like?
It felt so weird. It was very surreal. I was like, wait, I'm the one who's supposed to be crying. Who are you? Like, who are you? And then I realized, like, once I figured it out that he was a childhood friend of my dad's, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. But I didn't know that. It wasn't like he lived in another state. He wasn't, like a childhood friend that I knew about. So there was a lot of keeping in touch with people. And then in terms of money stuff, it was just trying to, once I got the death certificates, kind of get a hold of the accounts, you know what I mean? Just so that I could start paying things off. I knew that would be part of it. And then eventually I did, sorry, I'm like trying to remember all the order that this went in.
No, this is great. I want to focus on one specific, a couple of specific stories, but so basically when you have a trust, ideally everything gets put in or retitled into the trust. So the house, the cars, potentially the cars, the accounts, the insert maybe the mortgages, stuff like that. So your dad had a place in Wisconsin, he had a place in Florida, and so did your dad put all the assets into the trust?
Yes. So he put most of his assets into the trust. Most is the key there. He had this condo in Wisconsin, a condo in Florida. Both of those with the trust paperwork, there were like little papers showing that they had been deeded into the trust. But when I was talking with my dad's lawyer, I was like, how do I know what's even in the trust? And he was like, well, they should have made a list. They didn't make a list. So eventually I figured out through him and other people that any account that's in the trust will be mailed, like bills and statements and stuff will be mailed to the trust. Like it'll be at your address, or my dad's address rather, but it would be like the Daniel J. Robison Revocable Living Trust. You know what I mean? It would be the title on the letter. So eventually I sort of grasped, what was in there. And it was most things. Like he had done the work. Most of the important things that should have been in the trust were in the trust. The problem was that there were a few items that he forgot to put in the trust because he is a human being, like he's just a person. So because his legal residence was in Florida, which, by the way, we messed up on the death certificates because I had died in Wisconsin. So I put his Wisconsin, I wasn't thinking, I put his Wisconsin address, because that was closer to where he had died. And it was like, nope, his legal address was in Florida. So we had to get all the death certificates redone, which cost money. So that was cool. But
do you typically, would you go to like the accountant to understand where his legal residence was? Like, how do you even figure that out?
It was on his driver's license, but I didn't think to look at his driver's license. It didn't say on the form, put his legal address. It was just like address. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I put where he died. I wasn't thinking. If I had been in my right mind and not totally sad, I might have thought, oh, they probably need a legal address. And I honestly at the time wasn't sure which one was his legal address. But as it turns out, it was Florida. So we fixed that. But that also means I had to go through probate court in Florida for the items that he did not put into his trust. Because when you have a trust, you have a pour over will, like you said, so that the will is basically like everything I didn't put in the trust should go in the trust. But it's not like a magic wand. You can't just be like, haha, there's the pour over will. Now it goes in the trust. You have to go through probate court and be like, hello, judge, here's the will saying this should go in the trust. And then the judge will issue letters saying, yes, this should go in the trust. Like, you know, and luckily the assets he left out were small enough that we were able to do summary probate in Florida. So it wasn't like the entire probate process. But like, for example, he had a life insurance policy that he made when he was like when he and my mom were like early in their marriage, and it listed my mom as the beneficiary, but it didn't list me or my sister as secondary beneficiaries. It just said his estate. So it wasn't the trust either. So, because you could, you know, make the trust your beneficiary, but he didn't. So I had to get a thing to put that in the trust. And then there were also these like random stocks, like he had stock in Abbott, and it wasn't much, but like it was just not in the trust. And I had to like figure out how to, you know, get that into the trust. So there were a few items.
Yeah. How do you make those decisions? Like, how did you make those decisions with your dad's other assets, such as the house and the stocks and maybe the money from the life insurance and stuff like that?
How do you make the decisions in terms of what to do with them? I mean, I thought the easiest thing would be to get them in. Just my thought process was get everything you can into the trust. Because once it's in the trust, you are in charge. You are the trustee now, and you can then divide it. Because the trust is a pretty simple living trust. The goal of it is just to get the money to my sister and I without going to probate court, right? So my thought process was like, let's just get everything we can into the trust. And then once it's in the trust, it should be very easy for me to handle, sell, divide, whatever, you know what I mean? But it has been a harrowing process for some of those items, even after getting the letters from the judge, you know, because like the probate went smoothly in Florida. That did exactly what the judge was like, yes, you're right, these should go in the trust. But then getting all that documentation to these, you know, companies that are, because of course you can't ever talk to the company that's actually selling the stock. You have to talk to the company that's in charge of customer relations for the stock. And then they want this, it's just, paperwork nightmare.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a lot. And then there's the story about the ghost car. Yes, so I know you wrote an article about it, but please enlighten us. Talk to us about the ghost car.
Well, that's not even, that's a funny thing, because that's not even like a trust issue exactly. It's here's what happened. My mom bought my sister a car in Illinois, because that's where we were all living at the time, in 2019. So in Illinois, my mom bought my sister a car in 2019. However, she did not title it to my sister's name, and then she died. So theoretically, that should have been fine. My dad should have inherited the car, right? But he didn't title it over to his name or to my sister's name, and then he died. So my sister, this is about a year probably after my dad died, my sister calls me. And she's like, hey, I have to renew the registration on my car, but I don't have the title, like I don't have the stuff for the registration. I've never paid registration. I was like, well, what do you mean you've never registered your own car? That doesn't make any sense. And then she explained this to me, and I'm like, oh my God, she's driving around a car that she doesn't own. Like, this car is owned by two ghosts. So I drive up from Kentucky to Wisconsin, where my sister has since moved into my parents', which is actually an important part of the story. She had since moved into my parents' former condo in southern Wisconsin. So she now lives in Wisconsin. I live in Kentucky. I grab my sister. I'm like, we got to fix this. So we go to the DMV in Illinois, everyone's favorite place. And by this time I've got my binder, I've got my death certificates, I've got my will, I've got my trust, I've got the title, I've got, or I've got like all of these things, And I'm like, here's the problem. Like, and to be fair, it took a while, but like eventually we like got up through the, manager. And they were like, here's the problem. We can't title it to either of you, even though you are correct that you are like the heirs, because neither of you live in Illinois. So, and we're the Illinois DMV. So we can't title it over to either of you. So they titled it into the estate of Nancy Robison, which of course had been closed for years. So I was like, okay, got to reopen my mom's estate. In the meantime, we took some of the trust money and got Molly and put a down payment on a new car so that my sister could have a car that is in her name that she could drive. And I was like, it's fine. Once we figure out this thing with the old car, I'll sell it and replace the money in the trust with the sale, So I was like, great, whatever. Now you have a car that is legally yours. Wonderful. So then I'm like, okay, I got to reopen my mom's estate. So I contact a lawyer in Northern Illinois, and I'm like, here's the deal. Here's what happened. And he looks into it, and he's like, actually, because your dad died after your mom died, it would technically be in his estate. So you have to reopen his estate. So I contacted a lawyer in Florida. I'm like, here's the deal. Here's what the lawyer in Illinois says. And they're like, actually, we think it still has to be opened in her estate. And also this car isn't worth enough for us to like take on this case. Like, it's not enough. It's not worth enough for our trouble. So I'm like, okay. So basically I contacted the Kentucky clerk's office here, who's like the DMV here, basically. And I was like, this is the situation. It's a deranged situation. And I think the only way I get out of it is you make an exception. Like, I can give you all the paperwork. I can prove that these people are dead. You make an exception to just title the car into my name here in Kentucky so that I can sell it. Like, I think that is the only option we have. And I finally got someone to like sort of start this with me, and then they left the clerk's office. And so now I don't know what to do except perhaps set the car on fire. This is my other strategy. Just light it on fire.
You'll have to keep us posted on how it goes.
I will let you know. It's truly one of the most ridiculous situations I think I've ever been in. But I'm like, how can this be? It is a car. I'm not trying to I don't know what else I could do to prove to you that I'm not trying to scam you in any way. Like, this is just a really stupid situation. I don't even want to keep the car. I just want it to not be abandoned in my sister's condo parking lot. Like, I'm just trying to help you get an abandoned car out of your way.
Yeah. I mean, at some point you may just like leave it in a grocery store parking lot or something like that. But you don't want it to get back to your parents' estates either. And then you're in charge and blah, blah, blah.
Right. Like, someone on the article was like, could you report it abandoned and then try to when the state tries to can you then get the abandoned car? And then, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah.
It's one of those brutal, laughable processes that happen after a loss, the logistics and the finances after a loss.
Yeah, one of the most insane things that is continuing to happen to me, I guess. Yeah.
Of course. So is your dad's estate closed? How long has it been open?
No, there are a few outstanding items that I still have to deal with, mostly stocks at this point. The life insurance was easy enough to get into the trust. It's this these literally 2 little stocks, and it's such a pain trying to get them into the estate. But once they're all in the trust, then I can close it. I look forward greatly to this day. Oh, and I guess once I figure out what to do with the car, although that might be a lost cause, honestly, I don't know. Yeah. And I mean, hopefully my parents were had planned enough, and it's not a huge monetary loss, although it sucks. It should be something that we should be able to do, and it shouldn't be this hard.
Right. You may have to pay an attorney more than the car is even worth.
Right, exactly. And at that point, what's the point?
Yeah. So how long has it been? Close to 3 years?
Yeah, a little close to 3 years. Yeah.
Wow. Was there a moment in all of this over the past 3 years where you felt completely alone?
All the time. I still feel alone, even though I know that there are other people going through it. I often think I should start I don't know if anyone would join, but an Executors support group or something. There's just for people.
I'll join.
Yeah. Just for people who are going through it, because it's something, especially, because I'm kind of younger. I don't have a lot of friends who have gone through / are going through this. So when I'm I got to get this stuff through probate and put it in the estate, they're like, I don't know what that means. So even though they want to be, it's not like my friends are mean. They want to be supportive of me. They want to be helpful, but they just have no idea. They have no concept of what it is like to go through this. And like I was saying earlier, certainly I have relatives who did this, when their parents died, but they're older. They don't remember. I also think there's a pretty significant wealth disparity between boomers and millennials. And so I suspect a lot of them just hired a lawyer who just fixed it all. And then they really weren't doing much of this on their own at all. And I also think too that there's this gap in terms of understanding. When my grandparents died, right? My parents had a home, they had their own businesses, they had kids, they had investments, they had, they had their own lawyer. They had, when my dad died, I never hired a lawyer for anything, like ever in my life. I'd spoken to a lawyer, like not in any professional capacity, just someone who happened to be one. But like, it was so like, I was like, what do you mean hire a lawyer? That sounds that sounds fancy. How does that work? I don't know. Just like investments. I have a 401k through work. I hit the, I want to retire at 65 button. And that's all I ever, I don't know. It's just like, it was so confusing. And so I feel like it's really hard to find other people who are, going through this and who understand what a struggle it is. Cause I do think there might be some generational specifics to it as well. But, yeah, it's really, I felt, it's not like I felt alone in terms of like people, my friends and loved ones abandoning me, but I do feel alone in that I feel like I don't know really anyone or very few people who are going through a similar struggle.
Yeah, I definitely think the executor support group is really nice, especially for people in their 20s and 30s. And when you do experience this at a younger age and you are thrusted into that financial responsibility. I was 21 years old when my dad passed away, and I became the personal representative of his estate because he died intestate without a will.
Oh, great. God, that's even hard. Oh my God.
That was like the first time I'd spoken with an attorney, and the first time that I had to understand the difference between his IRA and his 401k and stuff like that. So it was definitely a learning experience. So
right. And of course at 21 you're an adult, but like you're not an adult. And I guess at 35 I was more of an adult, but I sure didn't feel like one, when coming up.
You have still a number of years of more life experience where you like sort of hear about these things, or maybe watch TV where like, X, Y, and Z person died without a will, and you like read an article or skim it or whatever it may be. But you're like, hey, this is never going to happen to me. And then all of a sudden it does. And you're just like, F this. Why is nobody talking about this? Why have I not been taught this in school or any aspect of adulthood?
Right. So, it's like a legal obligation. Like you have to leave me instructions for how to do this. This is crazy. Yeah. Also, TV is so wrong about how any of this, like it is kind of laughably funny how bad, like everyone's sitting in a room and there's like some elderly attorney reading the will out loud to members of the family. That doesn't happen. It's not a thing. Like it's not a thing. Hollywood made it up.
So what financial or logistical resources did you wish you had, if you can concoct any?
I wish I had instructions, first of all, like literally a checklist would have been great of like, here are the steps you take at what time, when. Obviously I made the resource I wanted to have. I made the website because I was like, somebody's got to fix this. And I guess it has to be me because nobody else is fixing it. So, because I had a writing background, and because I had a creative writing background and a web writing background for my job. And I'm a really obsessive note taker. So I was like, well, at the very least, at all of these meetings, I can take all of these notes and I can put it up there and figure it out. And then I started getting emails from people who were like, oh, thank you for putting this up there. So it's not just me, I started getting tons of surprisingly, someone included it in the newsletter. And suddenly I got like 20,000 views at one point. I was like, oh no, I've created a whole new job. But yeah, it's like, clearly this is needed. So I that's why I created the website, is because I was like, a resource needs to exist for this. That's not like a law textbook.
And even the law textbook, it's like not the instructions that we actually want or need.
Right. It's like case law. Yeah.
So, all right. So talk us through the kind of path. Started taking notes in all of these meetings, and then started the website, and then wrote the book. Is that correct? Like, what was going through your mind during each of these stages?
Yeah, initially it was supposed to be a side project. It was not supposed to be a life choice. It was just supposed to, or like a life altering thing. It was supposed to be, I was mad that nobody gave me instructions for this. So I will take notes at all of these meetings. And whenever I figure something out, it's going to be a living document. So I'm going to keep updating it. And whenever I figure out something in this process, I'm just going to pop it on this website. And I made this website fast. Like, my dad died in March. And I think by like the end of April, early May, I'd had like a skeleton website up, right? So I was like, just putting things, and this is something I did a lot for work. You know, I had the familiarity to do web writing, right? So it's like you need things in like sort of short, catchy bites, not like huge paragraphs. Although with this, sometimes it's hard to avoid many paragraphs. But I just tried to recount my experience. So, okay, this is how you get a death certificate. What does that mean? Here's like, you know, here are some things you should know. Like when you like, oh, there's a dead body. What do I do? Who do I call? You know, just like, okay, great. You know, just trying to like find this information as I could, you know, pulling in resources. If I found like, oh, this website has a helpful like listicle about this, I'll pop it over here. I'll pop in a link, you know, putting in resources, you know, just like kind of building a website from scratch. And this was like part of it. As I was going through the process, I was doing this. Like I said, someone shared it. It started getting a lot of views, and I started getting a lot of kind emails, but also helpful emails. Someone would say, hey, this is what happened to me. My mom had to have an autopsy. You should put some information about what that's like up here. I'm like, great. Tell me about that. You know, or some people would be like, we owned a timeshare. My parents owned a timeshare and I had to deal with the timeshare. I'm like, oh no, tell me what that's like. Cause I don't know. Timeshares sound like a nightmare. So I was just like gathering stuff and putting it up there. And then editors started like, I would start getting a few emails from book editors saying, is this going to be a book? And like I said, I had a creative writing background. While I had been working my corporate job, I had also been writing and trying to sell fiction, which is very hard to do, but I had an agent. So when this happened, I contacted my agent and I was like, oh no, I think we have to put together a book proposal so that we can try to sell this as a book. I'm not going to go into it here, but pitching nonfiction is really different from pitching fiction. With fiction, you need a whole novel. With nonfiction, you usually just need a book proposal, which is a lot like a business proposal. Why should you hire me to write this book? Blah, blah, blah. What's my audience? Who do I, why am I the right person? So anyway, we made a book proposal and eventually it got picked up by Quirk Books out of Philadelphia. They're awesome. I was familiar with their work, so I knew that it was going to look cool and that they would not try to tone down my weird dark humor vibe, which is great for me. And so I started writing the book at the very, very end of 2023 was when I started writing the book. And then publishing is a long, long process. So I was mostly writing through 2024, through 2025. We're editing, we're doing all of the, back and forth line edits and everything. And then the book finally came out in January of 2026. So it's still newer. It's my little baby. And the audiobook came out later than that.
Well, I'm a big fan of the audiobook. I've been listening in my car rides in the mornings when I'm dead tired, as you say. And it wakes me up, it gets me thinking. So transitioning sort of back to your parents as well, were there any questions that you wish you had the opportunity to ask your mom or your dad?
Oh, like everything. I wish we had had more conversations about everything, but specifically about this, I would have loved to know what they wanted for like funerals. I feel like on some way that would have not been a helpful conversation. They'd be like, just throw me away. You know what I mean? They'd be like, don't spend money on this. And I'd be like, no, the funeral's not just about you. Everybody wants more than you. You were liked. So yeah, but I would have asked them about that. I certainly would have asked them. I think this is a big thing anyone could do. I would have liked to have had a list of their assets and what those assets were worth. That's something you have to do as an executor or a trustee. Anything, once someone dies, you will need at some point a list of the assets that they own and what they were worth. So it would be great if that list was just made for you. If someone was like, here you go, here's the list of the assets and what they're worth. Especially because you might not realize all of the assets that someone has. Like I said, my parents were small business owners. My dad had designed a building that both their businesses operated out of, and they had sold their businesses. So I had assumed that they had sold the building. No, they were in the process of selling the building to someone who they had sold to the person they'd sold my mom's business to. Luckily, I knew who that person was. I was able to just continue it as we went along, but I was like, oh, surprise, extra whole extra building.
Right.
Yeah. And luckily they'd sold their businesses, because then I would have inherited the business and have to sort all of that out, which would have been a whole extra. I don't even want to think about that. It would have been perfect.
At 35 years old, or at any age, if you've never done it before, how do you sell a building? I wouldn't know where to start.
Yeah, exactly. It's selling everything was very hard. Like I sold their Florida condo. I guess it wasn't very hard in some ways. I got really lucky in that their neighbors wanted to buy the Florida condo, so we were able to
Mm-hmm.
do that pretty fast and relatively easy. But yeah, I don't know that much about real estate. That's why I put it in the book and on the website because I was like, oh, nobody my age knows how to buy or sell a house, so I'm just going to put this information up there so that you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. How do you honor your mom and dad's legacy today, and how has this experience changed your approach to life and to planning?
I hope I'm honoring my mom and dad through the website and through the book. When I was writing it, I was like, oh, would I have offended them by like kind of using their deaths as this impetus to, like, is it weird that I'm not really monetizing. I have to say books don't give you a lot of money, but you know what I mean? Like, is this weird? And I'm like, no, my dad was super conservative. He would be like, yeah, the American dream, profit off your parents' deaths. That's like what. But ultimately, my mom helped a lot of people, right? She was a therapist. She helped a lot of people. My dad designed buildings where people live and that sheltered people and designed like war memorials, and he did a lot of public work. And so it's a lot to live up to. So I can only hope that by building this website and writing this book that I am helping people as well. Like I just want to do something where I'm helping them, and like the memories of my parents, like the experience that I learned from dealing with my parents' deaths, in a way my parents are still helping them as well. So I know that they would be proud of me. That I'm not particularly worried about. But I hope that yeah, I don't know what I believe in terms of an afterlife, but I hope that they know that they're still helping people in a way through my book and through my website. And then in terms of how it's changed my planning, it just like made me plan. It never would have occurred to me at 35 to like make a will. Because why? Why would you do that? It's but as it turns out, you can die anytime. Cartoon anvil could fall on me tomorrow. So it's just it sounds dour, like, oh, and then you realize the heavy weight of death upon you and you feel like you have to do a plan. But also it can be sort of freeing, like, oh, I'll just take care of this and then I don't have to like worry about it anymore. I made the plan. So that's like check off that box. I think we're all like the people who care, we're all trying to put our loved ones not in the same position that our parents or whoever ended up. And I'm sure that we will. I'm sure I will screw something up and someone will have to go through an arduous process to like deal with whatever. But I can do the best I can to prevent that from happening. And I can leave them a book that they can read to help work through it after I screw up my own stuff.
There may be something that you'll leave out of the trust that it's like, oh crap, now we have to open probate in XYZ state.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll try to keep my car registered. If I ever sell my car to someone, I'll make sure that registration goes through. We're not doing that.
100%. Learn from the lessons. I do also just want to say that your parents' memory and spirit is definitely alive in the website and the book and everything that you're doing, and in your humor and the way you approach this very challenging topic. So I appreciate that you're using that to honor their legacy, and it's definitely happening. You don't have to question it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It means a lot. I miss them. And I wish, it's like so weird. I published this book and I'm like, I wish mom and dad could see the book that I wrote that wouldn't exist if they had not died. It's like this weird, paradox, but yeah.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, Becky, this has been an incredible episode. I want to put you in just a little bit of a situation. So I want you to imagine that you're speaking to somebody who reaches out, who is 35 years old and just lost both of their parents and are about to embark on exactly what you've been going through over the last 3+ years. Are there any grief mantras or words of wisdom you'd like to tell that person or leave our audience with?
I would say that first of all, you will figure this out because you have to, and everybody before you has figured it out, and you're going to figure it out too. And also, I would say that your living existence is more important than your parents' deaths, even if it doesn't feel that way right now. So the fact is, sure, is it important to take care of this stuff? Absolutely. But do not sacrifice your friendships or your hobbies or the things that are important to you that bring joy to your days. Like, prioritize that, because probate court isn't going to love you back. So, don't give your whole, you're alive still. So keep that in mind. Prioritize being alive over doing the paperwork of the dead. It's not like it's not important. It's not that you don't have to do it, but I think your own life and your own well-being comes first.
Definitely. I love that. Thank you for that. And just prioritizing your own well-being, finding the people who could offer support and play Twister with you when you need it the most.
Absolutely.
I really love that. Becky, how can people find you?
I am online. My website is deadparentswhatnow.com. Very easy, very simple. I wanted to make it straightforward. And then I'm on a lot of social media, mostly Instagram. I feel like that's where things really pop off, but on lots of social media at Dead Parents What Now. We got to keep things consistent. And then I have a podcast that I just started doing recently with a friend, because we're both white women in our 30s. So I believe that means we are legally required to start a podcast. It's called Bitching and Mourning. My co-host is Allison Zeidman, an Emmy-nominated comedy writer, and she also lost both her parents at around the same age, and then made a one-woman comedy show about death logistics and losing one's parents. So we're kind of the dynamic duo of dead parents and death logistics. And so we just like to, it's a grief grievances podcast. We like to complain about all of the annoying things about grief and death. So you can listen to that wherever you get your podcasts, I should say. And then my book, My Parents Are Dead, What Now? A Panic-Free Guide to the Practicalities of Death, is wherever you find your books in whatever format you like, whether that's paper, ebook, audio. You can get it all of those ways.
Well, on behalf of our listeners in this community, thank you for putting all those resources out there. And thank you so much for joining me today on this podcast. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. It was delightful to be here, and I'm excited for part 2.
Yeah, me too. Don't forget, part 2 will be coming out. We'll talk about Becky's, a little bit more about Becky's experience as a death doula, volunteering, then all the people she interviewed for the book. We'll dive into some more of the logistics and the things that she wrote about in the book that can help all of our listeners and our audience.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Amazing. Well, podcast family, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of The Currency of Grief. Don't forget, it's a great day to have a great day. So go have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Currency of Grief podcast. My hope is that today's conversation brought you clarity, comfort, and even a spark to start those difficult but necessary conversations in your own life. If you found this episode helpful, it would mean the world to me if you would share it with one other person who you feel this podcast could impact. And please, take a moment to leave us a 5-star review. Your review will help us reach more people who need this resource. Remember, the best time to talk about death and money was yesterday. The second best time is now. Until next time, I'm Justin Weidenfeld, your Grief Financial Officer, and this has been the Currency of Grief podcast.